Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We may be getting off the Bruce train tonight, though he will probably come up, as he often does. I've got my new friend Cam joining me. Cam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having me. It's really great to be here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us about yourself.
Sure, where to begin? I am a something-year-old man living currently with my partner, Amy, in San Diego, California. I am an author as well as an engineer, an odd combination. I'm originally hailed from Philadelphia in southern New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey
Yes,
boy transplanted out to San Diego.
nice. What sends you to San Diego way?
Snow
As Bruce
shovel.
says. What?
Down
Yeah.
San Diego way. There was a little room where they were playing guitars all night and all day.
Yes,
And I decided that I had to go play with them. Sound a
that's
little bit more
fun.
like Jesse Jackson than it did Bruce, I think.
No, I like that. Yeah. So I always like to start at the beginning. So talk about gr where you grew up and
Sure.
what kind of music
Yeah.
was your family listening to?
Good question. Yeah. So I was born in Levittown, Pennsylvania, little suburb. Not born in Reading, Pennsylvania. Good old blue collar steel town back in the day. And then my parents made the move to Levittown, Pennsylvania in the 60s. So I grew up there, suburb of Philadelphia. Background music was really interesting. People coming up in the 60s, my mom and dad really dug a lot of folk music, right? They weren't necessarily into more biting rock. There was a lot of folk singer-songwriter at the time, but they also had this deep love of classical and jazz. Davis, Coltrane, Jamal, the list went on. So I grew up hearing that music coming from the other room, jazz and classical and a little bit of folk. Rock didn't really enter the house. I had to go out and find it on my own when I got a little older, for sure. And I guess my musical taste took on its own and left my parents in high school. I was a child of the 70s, so Led Zeppelin, ELO, Eagles, Pink Floyd, Stones, The Doors, and of course, Bruce, for sure.
What
Um,
what year did you graduate high school?
1980.
Okay. So I graduated 77, so we're similar that we're AM radio rocked.
We totally
And
are.
yeah,
Yep.
we did. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, please.
I was going to ask you if you can remember when you first discovered Bruce and what about his music spoke to you.
I sure can. So it was 1975, Levittown, PA. Geez, I guess I was young. WMR, which was a big rock station in Philadelphia and was new at the time, they played Born to Run. And I was sitting alone in my room in a cheap rent subsidized apartment with my mother and my little brother in the other room. And I was listening to it on a pair of cheap headsets plugged into an old beat up stereo. And boy, oh boy, that song made me stand up. So that was probably the first exposure to Bruce for sure.
Why? What obviously Born to Run's a great song, but
Sure.
is there a personal reason why that spoke to you? And I'm
Yeah.
cheating because I know the book you wrote about and your upbringing.
Yeah. Well, I was 13 or 14. I think I was right on the cusp there. My father died the year before from cancer, and I was going through it, man. Books and music were my refuge.
Sure.
Uh, and that was it. I read books and I listened to music and I practiced playing my tennis racket in front of my mirror. I had heard rock poetry before, Morrison, Dylan, but it was different. It was his energy that came right out of the ground in New Jersey and Philadelphia. And it put me on edge. It motivated me to do something, but I didn't know what. I was a young kid with no direction, no way, no future. And it lit a spark and it made me want to change everything.
Wow, that's awesome. So you talked about, I want to go over because seems perfect thing. You wrote about your childhood. So you
I
talked
did.
about losing your father, and I can only imagine how devastating that was early. I lost mine in
Sorry.
2011, and it still is something that you miss that, but
Yeah,
losing it that young just had to be traumatic.
it was. Not, I'll try to keep it as non emotional as I can. And
I get it.
other things that went on after that, unfortunately, my mother fell apart, as who wouldn't.
Yeah.
She ended up joining a cult, though, drug me along to the cult. It was a high control group. So at a very young age, I had my father taken away, and then I had my freedoms taken away, and I couldn't be a man. I had to be whatever the cult wanted me to be. So eventually, through a very good friend of mine, I broke away, and I broke away through music. I became a nightclub DJ, and that gave me enough money to. Story's kind of long, but I was actually thrown out when I was 18 for not agreeing with the cult. I went to the street. I spent a couple years homeless, and music got me back. Music took me back to be able to have a home and have a future. I actually wrote a book about it. It's called The Truth About Demons. It hasn't been released yet. We're still shopping for an agent right now. I've got some agents that are interested, including one that works on Oprah's book club. So that might be interesting if that comes through. But yeah, it was a pretty interesting come up.
The I often we talk about music sets you free, and that music, I at the same time had certainly not the trauma of you, but I think all of us, like Don Henley once said, we all are victims of our high school experiences, right? Yeah, my dad was in the army, and
Mm,
we moved around constantly,
mm.
and my mom had her own anger issues. I said this the first time I said it out loud to a friend. I did not realize my mom would often say, "I'd kill you if I could afford to bury you." And I just thought it was funny. And when my friend heard that, he went, that's a horrible thing to
Yeah,
say."
that's not a normal thing.
Yeah, and music and books were my life too.
Yep,
Comic books, science fiction, mysteries, anything I could find to get into another world versus where I'm
amen.
at. Same thing
Absolutely.
to you, I take it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And in the book, I write about after my father had passed, I went into this dark place where two things that took me out. And you just nailed it. One was music. Bruce was one of those catalysts for sure.
Yeah,
The other was Star Wars. Believe it or
yeah,
not, seeing that movie and seeing Luke be able to step up and live a new life. He didn't have parents. He was an orphan, basically. And that transformed me. And that love of science fiction was also shared by my father. He took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey probably close to 15 times in 1969. And here I am, a little 7, 8-year-old, and my God, that movie moved mountains for me as far as the art. So science fiction and music became, and let me redirect that, not just science fiction, but literature in general. Music and literature were my saviors. The library was my safe place. It was my safe place from family abuse, safe place from the cult. And a lot of folks don't know, but the public library has music.
yeah.
We couldn't afford records, right? But public library has records, and they had a little room where you could actually go in and listen to the records on a headphone. So that was my cultural spot. And I pretty much raised myself from the time I was 13 to maybe 15, 16 at the library. And of course, music and literature are directly connected. What is music but literature set to music, to make a really stupid association? But you mentioned something interesting about fathers. Obviously, boys traditionally are impacted by their father. My father was a man of few words. He was a real post World War II dad. He was a boomer in every way. He had this artistic side to him. And I think what got me is his words were simple but powerful, like Bruce. So
Yeah. The is Did your mom finally get out of the cult?
she did not. I say, unfortunately, still in it. My mother needed direction. The cult gives her that.
Yeah.
And I think no judgment. We all find the place in life where we choose to be, and
Yeah.
that's okay for her. We've made peace with it. I've made peace with her. It was a long time coming. The book was kind of part of that process for me. It took me 2 years to write. I just completed it last year, and through that was a lot of cathartic analyzation of the entire scenario and situation that I went through. And there's some other pretty interesting components about my life. We don't want to talk about him here probably, but I ended up being involved with some interesting things in Philadelphia. I'll just say that. My website explains a little bit more if anybody wants to go to it. But yeah, it's a very interesting come up. The other thing about Bruce, just to raise real quick,
Sure.
at the time, and you probably recognize this too, the societal male role did not allow for introspection or emotion. All right. There was a way you had to be to get your man card. Right.
Yeah.
Which, in retrospect, I've got good and bad feelings about how that went. And I think today's society is recognizing and realizing there's a million flavors that still define a man. or a woman, or non-binary for that case. And what I loved about Bruce was that he didn't shy away from the emotion. He embraced it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I had a wonderful stepfather. I commented at my father's funeral that I had been lucky enough to have three dads. I had my grandfather on my mother's side, ran a dairy farm, very religious, taught me a lot about being kind and good to people. My wife's dad, Raymond, loved me like a son. There was no son-in-law. It was just I was his other son. And then my birth father, and then my stepfather. But there was that, like with my stepfather, you changed your own oil. You need to learn how to work a car. And I'm was not mechanically inclined and it was, at times, I think one of the things that I learned as a father is to recognize that my son is going to have different gifts than I am and to word that. Yeah, so I do think that's interesting. And then as someone who loves stories like yourself and mine, right? Bruce is a storyteller.
Absolutely.
And it is, I think that was no more prevalent than during the pandemic when he was doing From My Home to Yours.
Yeah.
And I remember someone telling me, we know he's a great storyteller. Why are we surprised he's so good at
Right.
telling, weaving stories and talking about it? Yeah.
So he does.
Yeah.
That's his heart and soul. That's why we love the man, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to put on my cheap psychology hat and go,
Uh-oh.
did you become an engineer because you wanted structure?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I became an engineer because I always loved to see how things work and wanted to take everything apart. In fact, I did take everything apart.
Okay.
One one of two quick stories about that. One of my earliest memories of being fascinated by how something worked from a technical standpoint was an old radio I found in a trash can, and I took it completely apart, and I put all the parts aside. I took all the parts apart that took the parts apart that could come apart. I didn't break
Right.
the other parts, and I found that what was broken on it was basically the piece of rubber that allowed you to tune in the radio station. So I found a rubber band in my dad's bin of parts, and I replaced it and put it back together again. And the satisfaction that gave me, not only did I understand now how radio worked, but I could actually impact and fix that, gave me the love of the universe. After my father passed away, unfortunately, I disassembled his 1964 automobile, the entire dashboard, half the engine, and that was an interesting story. So I was in the carport. I took pretty much everything apart that I could in that car. But did it was structure? I think it's more I need to understand how the world works. And I believe probably in my heart that if I understand how the world works, I can get ready for what might happen. Of course, that's fallacy. None of us can really understand how the world works. We're always trying to put band-aids on a river, but you try.
One of the things that I think is because my mom had so much anger as we grew up. And I am a firm believer, which is unrealistic, but I truly believe in my heart of hearts that if I can get two people that are arguing and get them to talk to each other, I feel like they can make peace, right? I just feel like that's all it matters is we could just, if we listen to each other. And that's sometimes very naive because it isn't that simple sometimes. But yeah, I think it's interesting how this subconsciously affects our decisions and what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you get any two people in the room that come from a pure intention of finding commonality, you can always find commonality. I don't think that people are that different. I think we all want the same things. And granted, there's certainly the aberrations on all sides of an issue that don't want the exact same thing. But I think the commonality between all people is we want to be happy. We want to have good interpersonal relationships with other human beings. We want to be loved and we want to love. We want to be
Yeah.
able to eat a meal. We want a roof over our head and we like to feel productive. That
You know,
commonality is everyone. I don't care what color you are, what sex you are. I don't care what nationality you are, what political persuasion of you are. Those commonalities are all there.
and Cam, that's what frustrates me at times is in both sides of the aisle. I will not despair either side, but you feel and I had a good friend bring this up. He like, you want everyone to have health insurance. I want everyone to have a health insurance. We just disagree how to do it. Seems like
That's
since
it.
we both want the same thing, we should be able to figure something in the middle. You want a safe border. I want a safe border. We just disagree how to do it. Seems like
Good.
we should be able to find common ground to get this common goal.
You would
Uh,
think.
yeah, but just not.
This is something interesting, if I may, real quick. They said, the
Sure.
art of compromise is where two people come together and they both leave unhappy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece that we as maybe a nation has forgotten. You don't get everything you want.
Right.
You don't. That's not compromise. That's winning and beating someone.
Yeah.
This country needs to be able to work together because the
Yeah.
people we're beating up are our brothers and sisters. And
Yeah.
it's just,
Absolutely. And the words of Mick, sometimes you get what you need, right?
amen.
There you go. I always like to preface this question with the amount of times you've seen Bruce perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. I've had people on this podcast that have never seen him. I've
Sure.
had people that have seen him hundreds of times. So have you been able to see Bruce perform live? And if so, do you count?
I have been fortunate to see him 7 times. And every time there's been a unique, incredible experience. And yes, I've never counted until there was a sample set of potential
Yeah.
questions. Oh, how many times? That's a good question. So I sat down and I took the Wayback Machine to find all the concerts that I attended. So it was 7 times. Most
So,
recent was just this past March here in San Diego. I wrote a little bit of a blog post about that. That was exciting. Before that, Citizens Bank Park in 2016. Then the Wayback Machine, 2003 in Atlantic City Boardwalk Hall. 2005 Tower Theater, 99 the Spectrum, 88 the Spectrum, and of course the very first time the Stone Pony.
oh, talk to me about that one.
Sure, the memory's a little hazy, but
Yes.
it was 1980 or something. My good friend Sydney and I, this was during the time when I was rapidly and relentlessly exploring nightclubs and the music scene all up and down the coast. And I believe we were sharing a shack in Long Beach Island, and we would go north and south to find new music venues. And I think we went up to see Southside Johnny, and we thought Southside Johnny was playing this Sunday night, and we went up, and turns out Southside Johnny was not playing. Back then, there was no internet. You relied on newspaper announcements or your buddies telling you who was going to play where. We didn't have a phone, so we couldn't even call the place. We ended up going up, and my friend Sid and I were sitting at the bar, and a really tall African American gentleman comes over to the bar and starts talking to Sid. We know who that was, the one and the only. A few minutes later, here comes Bruce. And he comes up to the bar. And now here I am sitting with a beer in my hand with my best friend in the universe, 2 feet away from Bruce. And Bruce gives me a nod. He goes, "How you doing?" I'm like, I had no words. I couldn't say anything. And he just wandered off with the big man. And they ended up playing a set that night. And I just got my ass 3 feet away from the man himself. And I got to listen to him play for, I guess it was a good couple hours. So that was my very first live time, purely by accident. Unknown to us, he was just dropping in the Stone Pony, and I think it was probably if I recall correctly, it was probably to blow up his Born in USA album. I think, but don't hold me
Yeah.
to that. That
Okay.
feels about right because I know there's some of those tracks I seem to recall from there, but I got to be honest with you, there's a whole lot of partying from that year on to the '90s.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, how we found each other, right, is you posted a blog about how Bruce Springsteen predicted my life. Talk to me a little bit about it, Cam.
Sure. When Bruce was speaking to this angsty teenager back in 1975, sure enough, he was telling me, "This town's just too small for you. You got to get out of here." And that's the theme of Born to Run, of course. And the town wasn't too small for me, but I thought it was. And all I know is it lit or added more fuel to the fire of me going out and doing something with my life, breaking away from the mess that was my situation. I felt that he was speaking to me, as millions of other disenfranchised kids at the time thought they were speaking to him too, especially in a little shady little town outside of Philadelphia. And then flash forward all these years later, just last month at the Pachanga Center. I think that's the name of the big old place where we saw him. It's right up the street from me here in San Diego. We're in Point Loma. And he sang that Down San Diego Way. And I swear to
Yes.
you, He was singing to me. Of course it's me. There's nobody else in this theater of 50,000 people. Thanks, Bruce. So he pretty much told me to get out of my hometown. And now here I am down San Diego way. So that kind of kicked me into this odd moment of connection. And I wrote about that a little bit, how music can do so much to us. Sometimes just reports on what we're doing.
Yeah. Um, do you have favorite songs, albums that you go
Oh,
to on a routinely basis?
absolutely. Albums Born to Run and Darkness are the two. They're on constant rotation in every playlist. And Thunder Road, Rosalita, Jungle Land, Streets of Philadelphia, because I spent some time on them. Born to Run, Badlands, all the heart pulsers, all the ones that just punch you in the chest and say, you got to do something. There's something going on in the world. And you got to do something about it. You got to get out there and do it. Now, there's some songs that I listen to repeatedly, and I was trying to think of the one. I'll come to me in a second, but I think out of all of those, I've got two flavors: Thunder Road when I need to have my ass kicked a little bit, Rosalita when I want to party a little bit, and Streets of Philadelphia when I'm feeling introspective. That kind of puts it all together for you.
That's interesting. What about Thunder Road makes you get up and go when you're kicking your butt? What way?
It's obviously the words. It's the poetry of we got to
Yeah,
get out. We got to get out while we're young. We got to get out and do something. That doesn't apply to just when you're young. That can apply to a lot of points in your life when you feel you've reached
absolutely.
an impasse or a stuck
Yeah.
point, right? You got to get out there. You got to get out there while you're alive, not just while you're young. So that song has always kicked my ass and kicked my ass when I was living in a one bedroom and apartment in the poor side of Levittown, and it kicks my ass today when I'm living in a little bit of a bigger house.
So I want to go back to you mentioned a little bit writing this story helped your healing.
Sure.
Is that what led to why you decided to write? How, tell me that journey. How did you decide that you needed to write this story down?
Sure, sure. So I've been writing since I could hold a crayon in my hand. I used to
Okay.
write stories and illustrate them for my mom and dad, and they would politely say, "Thank you." And they would put it in a pile that I know they never read. But for me, it wasn't that the fact that they read it, it was the writing for me that gave me happiness. It was telling a story. When I was very early on, I tried to play a guitar. I bought the cheapest guitar I could find, which made my fingers bleed. And I wrote songs and I wrote stories. And sometimes I took a story and tried to convert it to a song. And I was horrible at both playing the guitar and writing songs. But I
Okay.
did have a knack for story. Slowly but surely, I started to build up a little talent, I think, around telling stories. And I've written many things, and I never decided to commercialize any of them until I decided to tell my story. You reach a certain age, and you look back and you think about some things, and you share stories with friends and family, and sometimes in a public setting. And invariably, people would tell me, "Why don't you write all this down? You've had some really crazy stories and some crazy stuff happen in your life." And I took it for a grain of salt. I'm like, doesn't everybody? And the invariable answer from everybody was no. Everybody does not have this crazy of a life. Why don't you write it down? So that was really the impetus for me to write it down. I didn't set out to make it be a cathartic thing or to work through internal issues, although it certainly helped with some of them. But most of my demons were put to bed long ago. Did a lot of work to get them to be quiet. But going back, as I started to put down chops, different stories into chapters, I started to think maybe this can help somebody else. Maybe this can help a kid who had dyslexia when he was young, like me. Maybe this can help a kid who was bullied and beaten and blown up and abused and thrown into a cult, thrown out of the house at 18 with nothing but a bag of clothes and 3 crates of records. Maybe this can help somebody. So that's really why I wrote it.
Do, and so you're shopping it? You said that you
Yeah,
are working toward get it published?
yeah, I'd like to meet. This is my first foray to try to ever get somebody to represent or to get it published. Yes, we're shopping around to agents right now. It's a pretty complete state at this point, and we'll see where it goes. And I'm as it was when I was a young child, writing stories for my mom and my dad that they put on the pile. If that doesn't happen, that's perfectly okay. The thing for me was in the writing. I really enjoyed the process. I loved that. I learned a lot about a lot of things during that process. And so if it never gets picked up and published, I'm just going to give it away for free, and that's fine.
I noticed on your website that you can sign up and read the first chapter. So that's available, and I will include the link in the show notes. What do you think, this is the only one you got in you, or is there other stories you want to tell?
Great question. No, I got a few more. I'm actually two are in the works right now. I
Yeah.
won't say much about them, but they are both fiction. They're not based on my life, but they're based upon some lives that I've known during my travels. So
Okay.
they're fictional accounts of some good friends, and there's a lot of music, a lot of rock and roll in both stories. So it should be
That's good.
interesting.
Yeah. Are there songs you're chasing? You've talked about you've seen Bruce 7 times. The San Diego sounds like it was absolutely amazing show.
Uh,
I just saw him in Columbus as we're recording this, so it was a great show. But are there songs that you want to hear live that you haven't
uh,
got to hear yet?
Absolutely. Yeah. Geez, if I could, one of the dreams always been to see Patti Smith join Bruce and do Bring on the Night one time.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I'd like to hear Jungle Land live a few more times for sure. But outside of that, there's one song, and geez, I can't bring up the name of it right now, but it was an 80s new wave punk song, and I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen him do it once. It was recorded. I never seen him do it live. Why can't I remember the name of the song? Uh Anyway, it'll come
Okay.
to me and I'll back up with you. But
Okay.
yeah, I think he satisfies every time I've seen him. I've been satisfied. A couple songs maybe I'd like to see a few more times, but you know what? Whatever songs he brings to concert,
Hmm.
I'm good with that. I'm good with
Yeah.
that. He brings the rock and roll and he brings the church. How about
Yeah.
you? What songs would you like to hear more live?
I I have I was I got three that I'd never seen before at Columbus. I'd never seen Streets of Fire, I'm Going
Ah,
Down, or Twist and Shout. I would love something from Western Stars, though he's not doing any of those live. I would there's I would really love Burning Train, or a couple others from Letter to You. My cover is Jolie Blanc. He did that in Los Angeles. I grew up in a small town in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and the college I went to, Jolie Blanc was our fight song. I would love to hear him do
uh,
that. So there's a couple of those. All of mine are, most of mine are from my first live show was 2002 during the Rising. And so I've only gotten Mary's Place once. I'd love to hear that again. And then if it was me, he'd do Land and Hope and Dreams every night.
love
I
that
just
song.
adore
I love
that
it.
song. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
adore that song so much.
Oh, I sorry to interrupt you. The song just came to me. In Excess, Don't Change. He did it in Sydney, as far as I know, one time.
Yeah.
And that song happens to be one of the favorites of mine. Another just In Excess, one of my favorite bands. And when I discovered that Bruce did Don't Change by In Excess, I was shocked. I
Yeah.
must have played that thing 20 times on a loop. I was so
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. One of my big surprising was when he was doing the festival. They did a free show for the NCAA tournament that was here in Dallas, and they opened to Jump. And it was just, we all were like, what? I can't believe he's doing Van
No,
Halen.
I had
Yeah.
no idea. Is that somewhere on the tube? I got
Yes,
to find that.
if you do YouTube, they actually they come out to Sweet Georgia Brown, and Kevin, his guitar tech, is in a referee's shirt, and he and Niels do a jump ball, and when they hit it, the band starts and jump.
That I had no idea. Thank you. You
Yeah.
actually made my evening. I'm going to go look at
Yeah,
it.
it's a great version.
How
It
could it not
is.
be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what should I have asked you that I haven't, Cam? What stories have you not told that need to be told?
Oh, good Lord. There's a book
That
full.
won't get you in trouble, right?
There's, yeah, those carefully edited out. Besides, Amy might be listening, so I have to be careful.
Yes.
No, actually, Amy knows everything. That's what I love about her. She knows my past. She knows the life that I lived, and it was a bit of a rock and roll lifestyle for a minute. And she's
Yeah.
accepting. She's a very special lady. I think you did. I think you hit it. I think you hit it. Is there anything else I can tell you?
I think any other stories from shows? You talked about Bruce nodding at you. Any other shows from concerts that you want to share? Any other experiences?
Just the most recent one I think really stands out. Yeah, AC Boardwalk Hall stands out a little bit too because that was intimate. That was pretty much just guitar, Bruce and his guitar on stage. That was pretty sweet. Honestly, the '88 show and the '99, I just know that I partied, drank quite a bit, and enjoyed myself immensely. But I don't remember some details from those.
So
But
I just finished another podcast with a guy, and he was telling me the story that he was at a show in the 80s, and one of his friends had the seat in front of him, and his friend had perhaps drank a little too much
Oh no.
and fell asleep in the middle of the show. And then when the show was over, he woke up and his friend was like, I missed Born to Run? He goes, yes, you were asleep during Born to Run. I don't know how you stayed asleep with all of us screaming, yelling, but yes, that's great. All right, so before I let you go, I've got to ask you the Mary question.
May have
So,
frozen.
yes, if you are a fan of, you are checking out because you read Cam's blog, thank you. I end every podcast with what I call the Mary question. And what that is, Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher, now retired, but when he was teaching, he would give the lyrics to Thunder Road to his students, and they would study it as if it was a poem, talking about the themes Bruce explores, the imagery Bruce explores, and then he would ask his class at the end of the day, does Mary get in the car? Cam, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Of course she does. Are you telling me there's a person alive that would say no to Bruce in that poetry? Come on. She
Eh,
hops in and they go off that dirt road in the middle of the Jersey Shore. Absolutely.
Very nice. Any final thoughts, my friend?
Just want to thank you for everything you're doing. Really appreciate the heart to heart talk we had today about not just Bruce and his music, but real life stuff. Well done and thank you.
I appreciate that. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
Sure thing. www.camgilchrist.com. That's the website that we've been using to stage for the book release. Feel free to contact me through there if you have any questions, or there's a lot of resources I'm starting to build into that site for folks who might be going through some of the challenges that I went through regarding mental health and homelessness and cult awareness. So if reach out, whatever I can do.
That sounds awesome. My friend, this was a blast. Thank you. I look forward to maybe meeting in person one day. And when the book is published, you're going to have to come back and we'll do a kickoff episode, okay?
Love to, and I'll share some of the stories we didn't get to today.
Sounds great. All
Awesome.
right, listeners, go to the website. I will include the link in the show notes and let's all smile, let's be safe, let's be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.